Welcome to the Sanctuary of the Grieving Goddess. I am she. This is a sacred space devoted to grieving hearts. Here, we hold space for one another as our journeys intersect. Here, we laugh, we cry, and we learn with compassion, empathy, understanding, and absolutely no judgment. I am not a licensed professional, and this is not therapy. I am a woman who has survived some unimaginable losses, a woman who has been both shaped and strengthened by those losses, and I feel called by spirit to guide others through the darkness I once had to walk alone. So today we are going to begin at the beginning with the question almost no one ever asks someone who's grieving. Who were you before the loss? Because before grief reshaped you, before your world split in half, you were someone else. And that version of you deserves to be remembered. So if you would, take a slow breath with me, let your shoulders drop, and let's agree to give ourselves grace and allow ourselves to cry if we need to. And I will, because I do. Let's walk into this gently. So before my boys died, I was a different woman. Not immature, not unprepared for life, just naive to that kind of darkness. I had never met pain that deep. I didn't know that heartbreak could feel physical. I didn't know you can miss someone so much that it takes your breath away just to remember them. I was focused on my accounting degree. I loved fashion. I loved getting cute, stepping out, laughing, shopping, eating good food. I loved being silly for no reason. I was bubbly and joy came easy. And being a mother of four was my identity. I carried it proudly. It was my greatest joy in life. We celebrated everything together: birthdays, holidays, milestones, random days, all of it. We went places, we had fun, we took pictures, we built memories, we lived loud and full. And I had this whole future pictured in my mind because I had worked with them and invested so much with them to achieve it. Carlin was an extremely gifted welder, and he was almost done with welding school. And Kenji had a carpentry certification, and he had already achieved success as a dog breeder. I had envisioned them getting older, getting married, Carlin having more kids, Kenji having kids, period, but building their lives and expanding our legacies. I had imagined what they would look like over the years because they were so handsome. I had imagined the ways they would grow as men because we had had some really good conversations about what they wanted out of life. And that was the before version of me. And this is the kicker, and one of the ways that grief really plays with your head. That was the me that I fully expected to remain. I had plans for her too, and I lost her too. My 19-year-old son, Carlin, was killed first. When I got that call, it felt like the wind was knocked out of me. My chest collapsed, my spirit collapsed, my world collapsed. There was the sound of the news, and then there was this intense silence afterwards. And the silence hits your body harder than the words do. And nothing could have prepared me for that moment. There was no emotional training that I could have undergone that would have had me ready. My mind went blank, my spirit went dark, and my heart went into shock. And then 2 months and 5 days later, I lost my 21-year-old son, Kenji. But this time, it wasn't shock that met me on that phone call. It was absolute rage. My hurt turned into despair. It was utter disbelief wrapped in a developing firestorm. It was the feeling of being robbed again. Robbed of another one of my children, robbed of my joy, robbed of any chance at us getting back to normal. It wasn't fair, it wasn't right, and it didn't feel survivable. But yet, I realized I had to survive it anyway. And not that I initially wanted to. I tried to bargain at least one of their lives for mine several times. I cried every night until I couldn't breathe through my nose, until my head pounded, until my chest hurt, until I had to sit up to go to sleep. And every morning I woke up with tears already in my eyes. There was no moment of peace because there was no moment of not remembering what had happened. So I didn't get a moment of rest. And I didn't question God like a lot of people do because I was already past that in my understanding of life. I questioned things that up until that point I had been absolutely certain of that were now gone. I questioned love. I questioned joy. Would I ever feel the kind of love that Carlin gave me again? Would I ever feel the kind of joy that Kenji brought everywhere he went? My womb hurt, not in a doubled over kind of way, but in a way that made me painfully aware that major pieces of me were now gone. Their childhoods replayed in my mind nonstop. Every single memory was a wound. Every laugh became a reminder of what I couldn't have back. I felt like I was living with no air and no heart. And the thing that people don't talk about when grief is concerned is that it's not about losing the person, it's also about losing the life you had when they were here. When someone you love dies, you lose a lot. Some of the things are routines, holidays and special events, expectations, safety, trust, hope, and the way you once saw yourself. When my boys died, my life fell apart in ways I couldn't even name. I had to create Kenji's obituary by myself. I had to hear people tell me that they couldn't come to or participate in his services because they were still spiraling from Carlin's. And I didn't even have time to collapse because everyone else was collapsing too. And while those tragedies that broke my world didn't physically happen to my body, they destroyed the life that I recognized. That's one of the things that makes grief so lonely. You're mourning things that people can't see. So I withdrew from people. Not because I didn't love them, but because I couldn't stand hearing good news, especially good news about other people's children. One of my first outings after they died was a brunch. We all felt like I needed to get up and move around, and that it would be comforting to be in sisterhood. And it was hard, but I got dressed and I made it. Everything was going fine. The food was good. The fresh air felt amazing. And then one of the women at the table started talking about her adult children. Her daughter was living her best life. She was doing these really fabulous things. And I could feel my feelings start to bubble up. But I took a deep breath and I was okay. And then one of the other ladies at the table asked the lady who was speaking about her son. And she let out this relieved sigh. And she started talking about how well he was doing after he had gotten into some serious trouble. And I broke. I absolutely lost it. I left so hysterical that I couldn't find my car. And I ended up having to get security to help me find it. And all I kept thinking was, my boys didn't get that chance. They didn't get the chance to turn things around. They didn't get to grow up. And in that moment, I realized grief makes you angry at things you never thought you'd be angry at. It makes you jealous of people and situations you never thought you'd envy. It makes you grieve situations you never even experienced because they highlight the ones that you will never get. And it renders you painfully alone. Because how do you explain that to people? Since then, I have had some time to break some of this down. And one of the deepest truths I learned is that I wasn't just grieving my sons, I was also grieving the woman that I used to be. Because when I look in the mirror, I don't see her anymore. I don't see the bubbly, silly, carefree woman who believed the world was kind and the future was guaranteed. I see someone changed, someone matured, someone shaped by loss. A woman who has walked through darkness and come out different. Not broken, but different. And I'm still grieving her too, and that's okay. It's okay to miss who you were before the loss shattered your world. It's okay to grieve the versions of yourself that you had to leave behind. And it wasn't until recently that I got a chance to sit with her, to acknowledge her, to say goodbye to her, because everything happened so fast and the devastation was so total that I went straight into survival. And because I never mourned her, I spent years missing her in a way that hurt more than it healed. I missed her joy. I missed her energy. I missed her lightness. I missed her hope. I missed her innocence. I missed waking up without grief sitting on my chest. And here's what I had to understand to get past that point. She was only strong enough to get me there. She wasn't strong enough to carry me through what came next. The woman I used to be didn't have the capacity to survive what happened. She didn't have the emotional depth to get me through it. I couldn't stay her, and I couldn't return to her. I couldn't force myself back into a version of me that grief had already outgrown. And as much as I miss her sometimes, I had to become someone stronger, someone wiser, someone spiritually deeper, someone emotionally honest, someone whose power didn't exist back then because it hadn't even been forged yet. I want you to hear me when I say this. Missing who you were before the loss is natural, but staying attached to that person will only belabor your grief and keep you from becoming who you are meant to be now. Grief shapes us into someone new because the old version of us was not equipped for this chapter, and it's evolution, not weakness. You didn't lose yourself because you failed, you evolved because you had to survive. So grieve the person that you were, honor their joy, their innocence, their dreams, but don't force yourself to go back because you aren't meant to. Your former self walked you as far as they could, and the person you are now is the one who made it through, and they deserve to be honored too. Another reason this episode matters so much is because honoring who you were before the loss is how you honor the life you lived with the people you loved. It's how you acknowledge the innocence you didn't know you had, the joy you didn't realize was temporary, the identity you didn't know would end, the softness you didn't know grief would harden, the person you didn't know you'd have to bury. Grieving who you were is a sacred part of grieving who you lost. My body remembers those calls. My spirit remembers the shock of receiving the news both times. My heart remembers the silence after the calls. And I remember my life before. And that's why we start here. Because before you can rebuild anything, you have to acknowledge what you lost inside yourself. I'd like to take a moment and read the Compassion Insight from the Foundations of Grief workbook that accompanies this season. Grief doesn't just take the person you loved. It takes the version of you who loved them. It takes the world you lived in before that moment, the futures you imagined, the routines you built, and the parts of your identity you didn't realize were tied to their presence. Most people think grief is one loss, but grief is layered. Multiple losses living inside one event, some visible, but most invisible. You don't just lose the person, you lose the version of yourself who lived in the world with them. You lose ease, innocence, certainty, and the inner landscape that shaped your old life. Recognizing these secondary deaths isn't dramatizing grief, it's finally understanding it. It explains why the pain feels so deep, so disorienting, so life-altering. It removes the pressure to go back to normal because the version of you who existed before is no longer here. This insight softens guilt, quiets shame, and gives you permission to honor every part of what was lost, not just the person, but the self you were in the world they inhabited. And it expands your compassion. Once you understand that one loss touches every corner of a person's life, you stop assuming someone should be okay now. You stop overlooking the invisible ways their world has been rearranged. And this understanding invites you to meet yourself gently and to meet others with the tenderness you now know grief requires. Let this insight guide you. Let it widen you. Let it soften the way you move through grief, yours and others. Now, I want to gently turn it back to you and ask you, how will you use these insights when it's your turn to support someone who is grieving? You don't have to answer that right now. Just let the question sit with you. Let it move through your mind, your body, your memory. Every episode this season will take a few moments to sit with a compassion insight like this, to help you understand not only your own grief, but how you might hold space for someone else's. One thing that has really helped me through all of this has been writing. Putting my thoughts on paper made the pain move out of my body long enough for me to breathe. And that's partly why I created the Foundations of Grief workbook. This is not homework. It's a companion to this season of episodes where we walk through the basics of grief together. It gives you a place to speak the things you've never said out loud, a place to honor the old you, and begin quietly meeting the new you. So if you need a soft place to land, it's here for you. The link is in the bio and the description. Before the loss, you were a different person, and that person mattered. That person deserves to be remembered. And it's okay to grieve that person just as deeply as you grieve the person or people you lost. You are not alone in that, not here, never in this sanctuary. In the next episode, we're talking about things no one tells you about grief. And I can already name a few off the top of my head. But tune in next week to hear my top one. Until then, please be gentle with your grief, be gentle with your memories, and be gentle with the version of you who has survived the unthinkable. Welcome to the sanctuary.